Today I want to talk about English paper piecing, specifically working with hexagons. This is a favorite technique. It's wonderful for handwork, so when you don't have time to spend at the sewing machine, you're taking a trip, you're going to be around other people just chatting, working in a group. It's a great project to have on hand for just some hand sewing practice. And you can make such wonderful designs with these hexagons that are hand sewn together. Well, let me tell you a story about a disastrous project that I am ready to restart. This is the story of my Hexie Snowflake. A few years ago, I spent some time as an Island Batik ambassador, and in that program, you are given a design challenge each month, and one of the projects we were asked to do was English paper piecing. And I had wanted to try some hexagon work for a long time, so I scoured the internet and found a wonderful pattern for a Hexie snowflake. And with the blue fabric that I was given, I thought this would be a wonderful project. And at the time, I needed to have back surgery. And I thought, no problem. Handwork on the couch while I'm recovering, fill my days with movies and EPP, and life will be grand. So now I have these strips that I was sewing together according to the pattern, but they don't come together at all. And here's a picture of my disastrous attempt to get these strips together. I knew that wasn't going to work. So I decided to take all of these strips apart and start over. I will be making this pattern in the traditional hexagon flower mode. I can work with the groups of colors that I need and eventually piece these all together, and we'll have a much better result. Let me show you where I went wrong and what I'm doing to fix it. Here is what I was attempting to do with my hexagon project while I was recovering from back surgery. The smart move was purchasing these English paper piecing made easy templates from Sew Forever Quilting, and they are stickers. So I've got my fabric here, and I can just take this hexagon sticker and put it on the wrong side of my fabric. And these stickers are reusable, repositionable, 5 or 10 times until you lose the stickiness. So far so good. I know I need a 1/4 inch seam allowance around my fabric. And unfortunately, I couldn't stand very long at the time. So instead of preparing my fabric the proper way with a rotary cutter, I was holding the add 1/4 ruler and using scissors just like this on my sick bed to cut all my fabric. And I would cut a few Hexies like this and then sew them together in rows. And yes, I noticed that a few of them weren't exactly a good hexagon shape. They were a little more like lozenges and things, but I thought that would sew out. Here you can see a strip where I have sewn them together. These were all cut, by hand under the influence of pain medication. Do not recommend. So what I am doing to rescue this project is I have purchased a smaller size template from Sew Forever. I started with 1 inch hexagons, and I've gone down to 3/4 inch. So that will of course make my finished project a little bit smaller, but I think that is just fine. And I am trimming these properly with a rotary cutter, and I'm getting a much more accurate hexagon shape than I did trying to hand cut everything. So you can see that hand cut attempt there, and then my nice pretty second attempt. When I am sewing my hexagons together, I start with the template in the center square, and then I sew on all 6 sides. So for this particular section, I needed a light blue in the center, and then I was surrounding it with dark blue hexagons. And now I can just fold those together, and this time they match because they were cut properly. And now I can sew right along that edge and connect my floret. I like to work with about an 18-inch length of thread, and I'm making a quilter's knot. So I put the needle and the thread parallel, and I wind it around 4 or 5 times, and then just draw the needle and the thread through, and that makes a small knot at the bottom of my thread. And then, as I said, I line these up. I'm keeping this third piece of fabric out of the way, and I like to come up in the middle of the side of my hexagon, and I am going to stitch, eyeballing, 1/8 to 1/4 inch length stitches, and then just take a couple stitches, get to the corner there, and then I'm going to come all the way back and try not to get that other piece of thread in there. And I can see where my stitches were, so I can go in between, so I'll have a solid line of stitching on this side of the hexagon. Come over past that stitch. And I'm just sewing right along the edge of that sticker. And I get to the corner, and I'm going to make my way back to the middle. And again, tie off my thread. So I'm looping it through a stitch that I previously made. I'm going to wrap it around this loop of thread several times and just draw it through to make a little knot on the back side of my fabric, and then I can snip that tail, and I have that first side sewn together. Now, since I have that sticker in place, I can come to the other side and do another seam before I have to reposition that sticker. And there is the second petal, and then I can move my sticker around to this side. I'm going to place it right up next to that previous stitching line I made, and then I will have that 1/4 inch all the way around, and I can sew these next sides of my hexagon. Now, as I'm sure people will ask about my needle and thread, I bought a set of size 8 sharps, and that's the needle that I'm using, and I just bought a spool of clover silk thread, 50 weight, in a neutral color, and that's what I'm using to sew these together. Yes, if you look real closely, you can see some of my stitches. I'm not an expert. I'm using the done is better than perfect theory for this quilt, and we will just continue sewing those florets. I've got my pattern and I'm using a marker to note which hexagons I've finished, and it's probably very hard to tell on camera, but there's a slight difference between the dark gray, the light gray that's my light blue, and the white that I'm using for white. So we're just going to have 3 shades in this snowflake quilt, and then maybe in the next year or 2 I will have a finished quilt to hang on the wall in the winter time. Do you have any questions about English paper piecing? Leave them in the comments below and I'll answer them in a future video. I'll reach out to my expert friends such as Becky Campbell from Sew Forever Quilting. Wish me luck as I continue sewing my hexagon English paper piecing project. And if you are interested in some basic quilt blocks, traditional quilt blocks made with strips, I invite you to watch this video next. Happy quilting!